The world's largest fence spans over 3,100 miles from Queensland to South Australia. If stretched out, it could easily connect London to New York. And if you'd walk next to it, you'd need 6 months to complete the journey. It wasn't built to safeguard the Australian border. Why would it, since Aussies are just surrounded by water? It wasn't meant to protect some important building either. Its purpose is to keep some animal species away from each other. It was back in the late 1800s when Australians started building parts of this fence. They wanted to create a barrier separating the lively, bustling part of the country where cities like Melbourne and Sydney thrive from the harsh, dry outback. They used wooden posts dug deep into the ground, linked up with wire mesh standing about 6 feet tall. Some parts of the fence even have a second electrically charged layer. To make sure this fence did its job, they added some red and white lights to help guard things even at night. A team of over 20 people work full-time to keep things in check here. And every year, local authorities chip in around $750,000 to keep the construction in shape. Why all this trouble? The main reason was dingoes. These gingery, wolf-like creatures are Australia's largest carnivore mammals, and they're also apex predators. They were causing a lot of trouble to local farmers, especially in southern Queensland, where they often go after sheep. For the most part, the fence has been doing its job okay, but it's not foolproof. Some dingoes still manage to sneak through. Other times, wild camels end up crashing into it. That's because Australia has quite a massive camel population roaming around. But this man-made solution did more than locals expected. They thought there would just be fewer dingoes within the fence, but fewer dingoes mean more kangaroos. And more kangaroos mean more competition with the sheep for food. It's not just the bigger species feeling the squeeze. The smaller animals and the greenery also went through changes. With all this competition in a smaller space, locals noticed less diversity in the plant life and small animals. The soil became less nutritious over time, affecting plant growth. Plus, the fence acts as a roadblock for animal migration and seed dispersal. Even the sand dunes are feeling the effects, with less grass cover to hold things together. When scientists looked at kangaroos on both sides of the fence, they noticed that the young pups inside were lighter and tinier on average. The outsiders had bigger feet and heads for their age, and it wasn't because they were eating a different diet. The kangaroos that were stuck sharing the land with dingoes had to bulk up faster to survive. On the flip side, those inside the fence took it slower because they weren't under the same type of pressure. These had to compete with a lot of other creatures for food, so a bigger size wasn't a priority anymore. Researchers are still not sure if this difference is a quick fix or a long-term gene adaptation. What about domesticating dingoes? Wouldn't that help? Many think dingoes were once pets in Australia, but it's not known for sure. These days, they're pretty wild, just like wolves, hyenas, or coyotes. Most of them don't need packs to survive and are solitary hunters with sharp instincts built in. So taming them isn't going to be easy. Still, taking down the construction is not an option for now. Australians are so strict when it comes to making sure dingoes are kept away that they even put laws in place for people who mess up with the fence. Leaving a crossing gate open can put people behind bars for up to 3 months. Damaging the fence can cost people 6 months' worth of their freedom. It wasn't the first time Australians thought a fence could help with animal issues. Before they needed it for dingoes, they experienced a serious bunny invasion. Cute as they are, rabbits were damaging the land used for farming, so locals thought of a 3-part fence. The first one stretched all the way from Ravensthorpe in the south to Pardue Station on the Pilbara coast. It was over 1,100 miles long, making it the longest unbroken fence globally at the time. All these bunny problems could have been traced back to a man named Thomas Austin. Back in 1859, when he first came to the land down under, he thought it would be a good idea to release a few rabbits into the wild, thinking it would add a bit of charm to the place. But since rabbits aren't native to Australia, they didn't have any natural predators at the time. There also pretty adaptive creatures, needing just some grass for feeding. They reproduce at astonishing speeds too. A mama rabbit can have 4 litters a year, with as many as 5 bunnies each. Pretty soon, their numbers boomed. By the late 1880s, the bunnies had caused so much damage that local authorities came up with a proposal. They'd offer the equivalent of almost $2 million today to anyone who could come up with a solution to this long-eared problem. Nobody claimed the prize, but a commission did gather a bit over a decade later and came up with the fence idea. Maintaining those fences was complicated. They had inspectors keeping an eye, with each one responsible for a stretch about 500 miles long. There were also these boundary riders patrolling smaller sections, using bikes at first, then switching to camels or using camels to haul buggies. They even tried using cars at one point, but they couldn't handle the rough terrain and constantly had punctured tires. In terms of its effectiveness, well, by 1902, rabbits were already hanging out on the wrong side of the fence. That's why, 4 years later, they put up another one. It worked for a while, so much so that the local authorities didn't bother helping out farmers past that second fence with rabbit netting loans. Those caught between the two fences, however, still had a rough time dealing with rabbit trouble. Soon enough, rabbits spread even over fence number 2, and it was clear the solution didn't work. In some areas, even while the fences were being built, those sneaky bunnies found their way past them. To this day, the rabbit population still sometimes puts the Australian officials through rough times. The dingo fence may be the longest one, but it's not the weirdest. The aquarium fence in Turkey might take that prize. This 164-foot aquarium fence was built to make sure the expensive villa's ocean view would be visible from every one of its levels. These days, it gathers a lot of tourists from all over the world, eager to see the variety of fish it contains, and even the octopuses. Putting up a see-through structure wasn't hard. The real challenge was connecting the aqua fence to the Aegean Sea through a buried pipeline stretching across 13,000 feet of land. This ensures water constantly flows, keeping the aquarium clean and the fish happy. To make sure no one damages the delicate fence or steals any of the fish or two, the owner also invested in security. He installed a network of 17 cameras equipped with facial recognition. Visitors are free to look and take pictures, but step too close and you're likely to trigger alarms. Another one of those weird fences is New Zealand's bra fence. If you ever find yourself through central Otago, you might stumble upon a fence adorned with bras of all kinds of shapes, sizes, and patterns. Its story takes us back to 1999, when people in the area found 4 bras mysteriously hanging on the fence near Cardrona Valley Road. Some were a bit surprised, but then others started adding their bras to the decor. Some more bras appeared, and it became a must-see spot for tourists. Its popularity was so high that at times it caused traffic problems in the area.
You know how they say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do? Meaning, in Rome, you need to make sure your goldfish has a deluxe bowl to live in. In Nigeria, don't you dare to bring your own wheelbarrow. And perish the thought of adding as much mayo as you want to your dish when you're in France. Yep, bans around the world may be surprising, to say the least. Number 1. You will never see a good old doorknob in Vancouver, Canada. Some time ago, the city changed its building code to require the use of cool and sleek door levers instead. This change is all about making buildings more accessible and easier to use. Not only new buildings are getting a new makeover, even Vancouver's historic City Hall had its fancy Art Deco doorknobs replaced with shiny gold levers. But it's not that you can't legally have it in your house. There isn't a team of doorknob police coming to your house to confiscate your knobs. You can keep them as long as you like. Number 2 comes with a GeoGuessr tip for y'all. If you see this chair in the picture, it means it's 100% not in Basel, Switzerland. It's called a monoblock chair, and it's special. You see, most objects give away clues about when and where they're from, like the shape of electrical outlets or the labels on your shampoo bottle. But the monoblock is context-free. Some people call them one of the world's most perfectly designed objects, while others say the homogeneous nature of the chair is disturbing and the real evil of globalization. But why is it banned in Basel? Turns out the authorities just want the city to be pretty, and the chair design isn't to their liking. Right, if you want to keep one in your backyard, feel free. But they've been a big no in public spaces since 2008. 3. If you were ever thinking of bringing a wheelbarrow to Nigeria, I've got some news for you. Don't even try. Should you need it for some reason during your stay in Nigeria, just buy one there when you arrive. The authorities won't let you bring your imported wheelbarrow across the border. Why? Well, they're all about supporting their own manufacturing industry, so they want to give their local wheelbarrow makers a chance to shine. At number 4, we've got China, where the authorities decided to put a stop to time travel. Wait a minute, it's not what you think. No time travel machine has been invented. The ban is on TV shows and movies. By the way, it's not something new. The law was introduced in the early 2010s. Apparently, the big shots in charge want to keep things real and are not too keen on distorting historical events. They say some scripts are getting a bit too wild, making up myths, promoting superstition, and disrespecting the country's past. 5. Coffee pods. They've become super popular because they make brewing coffee so easy. But Hamburg, Germany doesn't seem to be a fan of those pods. Around 8 years ago, they took a stand by banning plastic coffee pods from authorities' offices. These little pods are made of various materials, making recycling a real challenge. While it's true that these coffee capsules can create a lot of problems, they're still loved by many. In fact, they've become a big hit in the US and Europe, making up a chunk of the coffee market. Hamburg is hoping to lead the way in showing people just how wasteful these pods really are. Number 6. Chewing gum. It has been banned in Singapore since 1992. The ban was put in place to stop people from sticking gum in all sorts of weird places, like subway doors, lock cylinders, and elevator buttons. Yuck. But costly train shenanigans were the last straw for the authorities. The ban was put in place after some serious gum incidents on the mass rapid transit or MRT trains in the late 80s. Some mischievous pranksters have been gumming up the works on MRT trains by sticking chewing gum on the door sensors. That caused a sticky situation and messed up train services. And there you have it, chewing gum got completely banned. Now, just a note here, yep, these are gums prescribed for therapeutic or dental reasons. And yep, they're still allowed. Also, don't get this whole ban wrong. It's not illegal to chew gum in Singapore. So if you come there as a tourist, you can bring in a little gum for personal use if you're traveling. Just do not stick it under this nice park bench, okay? What will create you a ton of troubles, though, is importing and selling chewing gum. Iceland is number 7 in our ban hit parade. Back in 1994, Reykjavik was like, no dogs allowed. It wasn't because they were all about cats, it was to stop this nasty tapeworm from spreading. The disease was serious business, causing all sorts of health problems. But don't worry, dogs are cool now as long as they follow the rules. Nowadays in Reykjavik, it's all about the cats. They're everywhere, roaming the streets like they, own the place. You can't walk 2 steps without seeing a furry little friend begging for attention. These Reykjavik kitties are so popular that they even have their own Facebook page. People love them, and some even carry around treats just in case they come across a friendly feline. And since there aren't many threats to cats in Iceland, they're thriving. 8. The Philippines. Now this one is really weird. Singing My Way in karaoke bars is sort of banned in this country. This seemingly harmless song has been linked to some pretty serious consequences, like fistfights and even people's early demise. No one knows the exact number of lethal cases caused by this song, but there have been at least a handful of incidents in the last 10 years. The song's lyrics, which can come off as a bit arrogant and prideful, seem to rile people up when sung in a not-so-great way. This has led some karaoke bars to unofficially ban the song to prevent any craziness from breaking out. 9. Hey, have you heard about Japan's Metabo law? It's all about measuring waist sizes to tackle obesity. It was introduced in 2008, And the idea was that if companies and local authorities didn't meet the goals, they would face financial penalties. The Ministry of Health believed this campaign would help prevent various health conditions. So, every year, people aged 40 to 75 had to get their waist measured. Employers and local authorities needed to make sure at least 65% of people participated. The goal was to reduce Japan's obesity rates by 25% by 2015, and if they hadn't made it, they would have gotten slapped with a fine. Did it work? Well, in 2024, there are only 4.5% of people who reportedly have weight issues in Japan. Number 10, and we're back to Canada. So if you catch someone in there counting out pennies in line, you can totally have some fun with them, legally speaking, of course. According to the Canadian Currency Act, there's a limit to the number of pennies you can use in a transaction, 25 to be exact. So, if someone tries using 26 coins, you can play sheriff and send them to coin jail. Snatch up their pennies as evidence. Yeah. 11. A condiment-regulated country here. Apparently, in France, they're cracking down on condiments in public schools. They're trying to make meals healthier for students. The rule is that you can't just go crazy with mayo, ketchup, and vinaigrette anymore. They have to be served according to the dish. Finally, Italy. In Rome, you can't keep your goldfish in a boring old glass bowl. Nope, that's considered cruel, because those little guys need their oxygen flow. Plus, if you keep them in a bowl for too long, they might go blind. Also, you can't give away goldfish as prizes. The law has a whole subsection about it. So if you're planning on bringing a goldfish home from your next trip to Rome, make sure you've got a fancy tank ready for them. And thank you for watching. In Mongolia, dinosaurs used to live, and now there are as many horses as there are people and 10 times as many sheep there. It's the emptiest country in the world. The capital has been moved 28 times, and they even have their own Olympics. So Mongolia is located right here, on the plateau of Central Asia, right north of China. It's the 19th country in the world by land area, but it only has a bit over 3 million people. It's like the population of Los Angeles, but having a whole country to themselves. If we don't count Greenland, Mongolia is the country with the lowest population density. It has only 2 people per half a square mile. The United States has 37. Well, that is if we only count people. Mongolia has a lot of livestock, about 67 million. It's 20 times more than the number of people there. Half of that livestock is sheep. Yet of all their animals, the most prestigious one is the horse. There's a traditional saying, a Mongol without a horse is like a bird without wings, and it explains a lot. A person with many horses is considered wealthy, but don't picture huge farms with big stables filled with horses. In Mongolia, having stables is more of an exception. Horses there roam free outside all year long. It costs next to nothing to sustain a horse there because they roam outside and even find food themselves, and the country's nature provides them with enough. Winter is tough because everything is covered in snow, but horses can separate grass from snow. They get frail by spring due to a lack of food, but recover very soon after winter is over. A family can have a sacred horse in their herd. It wears a blue scarf around its neck and is almost never ridden. People there do love their horses, and this tender relationship goes centuries back. There are many songs, stories, myths, and artwork featuring horses. In the Mongolian language, there are about 500 words to describe the traits of horses, and over 200 words to describe the coat color and pattern alone. Horses have a spiritual meaning too. It's believed that they have spirits that can help the owner, and they are also believed to be a transport to heaven, so they were often sacrificed after their owner's passing. Apart from domestic animals, the country is home to some endangered species. Plus, back in the day, dinosaurs roamed the land. The first ever discovered dinosaur egg was found right there. Today, dinosaurs are, of course, extinct, except in the movies. But there are snow leopards in Mongolia, and those are also rare. If you ever do go to this country, you must be careful. Snow leopards are so quiet, you won't hear them approaching you. They make no sound as they walk. But let's get back to geography. The climate in Mongolia can be harsh and unpredictable. Within just one day, the temperature can change by 35 degrees Fahrenheit. The country doesn't have any access to large bodies of water. That's why it's very dry and doesn't get much rain. In the south of Mongolia, there is a part of one of the coldest deserts on Earth, the Gobi Desert. Only 5% of the desert is covered in sand. The rest is bare rock. It has rivers, small lakes, and grasslands, but also gold, coal, and copper. So it's not a very typical desert, but still a desert. Rain clouds don't reach there because of the Himalayan range that keeps the area in the shadow. The desert is expanding every year, because of climate change, of course, but also because of deforestation and changes in land use. The whole country is quite dry with little precipitation, and that's why the inhabitants aren't afraid of the desert. Yes, the desert is populated. There are people living there. They're nomads who are busy with raising cattle. Nomads are people who don't have a settled home. They travel with their animals from place to place following the seasons. When they settle somewhere before their next trip, they set up a tent that is called a yurt. These have been homes in Mongolia for thousands of years, and it's amazing that some people still live in them. The skeleton of a yurt is made of poles, which are then covered with layers of felt and waterproof fabric. The Mongols are a very welcoming nation overall, but the nomads are on a whole other level. They don't get guests often, and they're always ready to greet someone and give them a taste of traditional horse milk. They don't even have bells at the entrance of their yurts, inviting guests to walk right in. Of course, there are also people who live in cities and villages and have settled homes, and they are the majority, about 3/4 of the population. The biggest city in the country is the capital, Ulaanbaatar. Almost half of the country's population is concentrated there, in just one city, even though it's the coldest capital city in the world. The average yearly temperature there is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. The average temperature in Washington, D.C. is 60 degrees, and it's 44 in Ottawa. When the city was first founded in the 17th century, it was located about 180 miles southwest of the current place. Then it was moved a little bit 28 times until it finally settled in the current location. Why? Well, back then, most of the population were nomads, so the capital city was a mobile settlement too. Depending on seasons, pastures, water supplies, and many other factors, it moved along with its inhabitants. Now the city is big and settled, so maybe it won't be moved again. But who knows? I know, I have yet to tell you about the Mongolian Olympic Games. The event is called Naadam Festival. It's an annual festival held in the middle of summer that most Mongolians watch. In one form or another, the festival has existed for centuries. Locally, the festival is called the 3 Games of Men, and people compete in 3 skills that have traditionally been considered 3 manly skills. So, what are those 3 games? It's Mongolian wrestling, horse racing, and archery. Originally, it was just men competing, but recently women have started participating in archery and horse racing. Mongolian wrestling is a folk wrestling style that's been around for thousands of years. The depictions of it can be seen on many ancient plates found in the area. Today, it's the most popular sport in the country, and Mongolia hosts many international tournaments too. So, of course, there is a wrestling part at the festival, and it's the first game. The rules are quite simple. Whoever touches the ground with anything other than a foot loses. There are no weight classes, no age or time limits, so it takes as long as it needs to win. And yet, they do it with grace. Match courtesy is important. For example, if an opponent's clothes get tangled, the other one is supposed to stop and help solve the issue, even if it means missing a good opportunity to win. At the end of the match, when one participant is defeated, the winner will give them a hand and help them back up on their feet. The game starts with either 512 or 1,024 participants who wrestle in pairs. Every loser is eliminated. The game goes on for 9 or 10 rounds, depending on the initial number of participants, until there is a winner. Then there's horse racing. This is a cross-country long-distance event, between 10 to 17 miles, depending on the age of the horse. Up to 1,000 horses from all over Mongolia can participate in the competition. Then, in archery, people compete in teams of 10. Each archer wears traditional clothes and has 4 arrows to shoot into a wall of woven or wooden cylinders. Knock one out of the wall and you get points, and the team that gets the most points wins. Now, when you think of Norway, things that come to mind are the sun that never sets in the summer, unbelievable nature, the fact that it's one of the happiest countries in the world, even white bears that freely roam in the wild. I'm guessing they're happy too. Already planning your trip to this dream country? Well, don't rush. You'll have to review your budget. Fuel there is 10 to 15% more expensive than in other Western European countries. A meal at a cafe for one person will cost at least $30. Plus, consider yourself lucky if you manage to find a hotel at $100 a night. If you Google the most expensive country in the world, you'll see this list. Switzerland, which is meanishly expensive. The United States, duh, been there, know that. Luxembourg is not a surprise either. And then, all of a sudden, you see Norway. Just so you know, a family of 4 would need over $4,000 a month just to exist in Norway. And it doesn't even include rent. Specialists say that Norway is around 7% more expensive than in the US. Norway is a bit weird though. Usually the richest countries have national currencies that are stronger than the US dollar. Take Swiss francs, for example, or the Kuwaiti dinar, which is literally the boss when it comes to currencies. Like one Kuwaiti dinar can snag you $3.25 US. Now, here's where the mismatch comes. The Norwegian krone is dubbed the weakest currency in the West. Well, how come? In the wild world of global currencies, the Norwegian krone used to be a tough player known for smart money moves. But surprisingly, it is now the weakest currency in the West, taking a big hit in the last decade. It has fallen hard against the US dollar and euro, causing concern for central banks and money folks worldwide. The oil price roller coaster is a major factor in the krone's struggle, as Norway relies heavily on oil exports. But even with oil prices relatively high, it remains historically weak against major currencies. The weak Norwegian krone is affecting everyday folks too, with prices rising on almost everything due to heavy imports. Inflation is growing, leading to interest rate hikes by the Norges Bank. High interest rates are hurting the housing market and making life more expensive for Norwegian citizens. So one of the supposed reasons for why Norway is so expensive might be weak national currency. What else is particular about Norway? Well, climate for sure. It may be hard to imagine a freezingly cold country plunging into riches. It's an imagery we usually see on social media with geotags Dubai, Saudi Arabia, or even Kuwait. And it makes sense to think now that all the riches are somewhere southward, as these places have strong oil-based economies and super strong currencies. But in reality, better economies in the south are a current trend. Ever wonder why cold countries seem to be raking in the cash while the hot nations are just hanging out? Turns out, those living in chilly climates had to hustle just to survive winter. Think building shelter, stockpiling food, and keeping that fire burning. Meanwhile, those basking in the sunshine had it a little easier with hunting and foraging year-round. This theory holds true even in the land down under. Sydney and Melbourne, the top dogs in Australia's wealth game, also happen to be some of the coldest cities, while Darwin, the warmest city, is lagging behind. Some might argue that this theory doesn't hold up when we look at ancient civilizations or modern hotspots like tropical Singapore. But hey, times change, and so does wealth generation. Back in the day, it was all about farming, but now it's more about industry and innovation. So, Norway may seem to have been bound to get rich historically and geographically. Still, it's not exactly so. Norway used to struggle a lot. Back in the day, it faced some tough times with harsh winters and tricky geography. They even had famines that pushed families to seek a better life in the US. So, how did Norway go from rags to riches? Yep, oil and gas played a big role. The country is small, but it has around 0.31% of all oil reserves in the world. But in Norway, there's more to the story than just black gold. For example, the top oil reserve is not some Arabic country, but Venezuela, which claims up to 20% of the world's liquid gold. Still, Venezuelans' economy is far from stable, so it's not all about oil. Although bested in forest size by other European nations, Norway was an unrivaled powerhouse in lumber during the Age of Sail. Thanks to its strategic fjord path, timber from its inland forests could quickly reach fjordside mills and global markets. As railroads unlocked larger forest potential in other countries post the 19th century, Norway was Europe's timber king, bolstered by a world-class merchant fleet by the 20th century. The Norwegian timber wealth, coupled with early cooperative societal norms, spurred growth across several sectors, from agriculture to fishing and banking. Despite being labeled poor in the 19th century, Norway's GDP per capita outshone Eastern and Southern European nations. The nation's ascendancy continues beyond the discovery of its oil reserves. Norway is unique, with a small population but sprawling land. Despite its vastness, the Nordics are scattered and considered one of the most spacious countries globally. Much of the North's territory stretches beyond the Arctic Circle, offering harsh landscapes with thin topsoil covering the bedrock. The tough terrain in Norway, full of mountains and with a short growing season, limits arable land to only 2.2%, similar to Yemen. The scattered arable land in small valleys makes extensive farming impractical, a far cry from the efficient farming in the U.S. With a huge chunk of land and coastlines, but a small population, Norway makes some serious cash from its reserves. Plus, nature has been pretty kind in Norway, with rich fishing grounds, hydropower from rivers, and power from cold waters. And only then comes the little thing called oil. The late 50s saw a big discovery that changed everything for Norway's economy. Fast forward to today, and petroleum activities have been a major game changer for Norway, feeding its economic growth and funding its welfare state. But Norway didn't just sit back and watch the money flow in. They made smart moves, like creating a sovereign wealth fund to manage their oil wealth for the long haul. The fund sees some big bucks, currently standing at 1.7 billion Norwegian kroner, or over 160 million US dollars. Norway uses the interest from this fund to boost its annual budget, ensuring top-notch healthcare, education, and welfare for its citizens. And here's the kicker: Norway's not resting on its laurels. They're investing in sustainable technologies, like offshore wind power, to secure a bright future beyond oil and gas. Now, Norway may be expensive, but it can't compete with the world's costliest place to live, Monaco. It's almost 4 times more expensive than the global average. So, if you're looking to rub elbows with the rich and famous, look no further than Monaco. With property prices soaring to an average of over $50,000 per square meter in 2022, it's no wonder why this tiny country is a magnet for the la-di-da. However, there's a place that's particularly expensive for tourists, and I'm not talking about tourist traps. Neither Oslo nor Monaco can beat the prices in, well, take a second to make your guess. Ready? Welcome to Ashgabat, Turkmenistan's capital. A gallon of milk costs a whopping $15 US, while a standard internet subscription plan will set you back $168 US a month. Calm down, you're not poor, it's just an economic glitch. The reason for these prices is simple. The Turkmen national currency exchange rate in relation to dollars is fixed and never changes. $1 equals 3.5 manats, and it's been so since 2015. Local prices in the local currency grew to inflation, making it not proportionate to prices in dollars. The exchange rate never changes. So if you live there, such prices don't seem to be extraordinary. But if you come with dollars, you're in for a pricey trip.
It all started with the home insurance building that was built in 1885 in Chicago. Just a 10-story building, but it was a revolution at the time. And that was the beginning of the era of skyscrapers. It was constructed using a revolutionary method. The building had an inner skeleton made of steel, which allowed the walls to be thinner and the whole structure being higher than ever. It stood until 1931, when it was demolished to build the Bank of America that stands even today. That very same year, the construction of the Empire State Building in New York was completed. The Empire State is as tall as 10 home insurance buildings on top of one another. That's the construction progress humanity made in just 46 years. The Empire State became the tallest construction in the world and held that status for 39 years. Now, a bit more than a half-century later, the Empire State Building is ranked 53 on the list of the tallest constructions. humanity has climbed way higher. The tallest building in the world today is Burj Khalifa, located in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. It's 2,717 feet tall, more than 2 Empire State Buildings on top of one another. Even though skyscrapers started out in the United States, they became tremendously popular in Asia. Just to put it in perspective, around 80% of the skyscrapers that exist in the world are in Asia. And in total, the continent has over 7,500 skyscrapers. The country with the most skyscrapers is China, having almost 3,000 of them. Why do they like skyscrapers so much? Well, Asia has the largest population in the world and their economy is booming. So, growing high is a perfect solution to fit as many people as possible in its cities. But close to China, there's also India, having almost the same population. Still, they have 10 times fewer skyscrapers, with their number being a bit over 200, and most of them being located in Mumbai. So why doesn't India build skyscrapers if it's such a great way to accommodate people? Turns out, the country strictly regulates the construction, saying that it's due to health and safety. You see, there's quite a popular urban theory that big structures that accommodate a lot of people lead to higher population density, more anonymity in the city, and lower safety in the territory. So India is trying to avoid it by building low. Problem is that when a city can't accommodate everyone who wants to live there, the cities start growing horizontally. One more thing is that the land and the apartments are very expensive due to their scarcity, so very few people can afford it. This way, India has started to loosen the restrictions recently and is now slowly allowing to build a bit higher. 34 skyscrapers are now under construction. Do you know what other place in the world refuses to build skyscrapers too? Europe. New York alone has more skyscrapers than all of Europe combined. There are just 250 skyscrapers in Europe, and half of them are in just 3 cities. Europe has a whole different reason to resist tall buildings. The history of skyscrapers goes back to just a bit over 100 years ago, to the 20th century USA. The USA is quite a young country, and the cities are still being built from scratch. There is a lot of available land. When the United States were being built, many European cities had already been around for dozens of centuries. There's not much more room for construction, and no one has any desire to take down the Colosseum and put some fancy skyscraper there instead. There was also no practical reason for changing things. The driving force of Asian and American skyscrapers is the booming population of the cities. Also, Europeans are very protective of their city skylines. The story comes to Brussels, the capital of Belgium, which even got the term Brusselization. In the 1960s, there were no zoning regulations and some buildings in Brussels were demolished to make room for more modern buildings to develop business districts. Uncontrollable construction started, and modern buildings were built in random places around Brussels. They had no cultural or historical value, and they didn't fit in the city architecture at all, messing up the city's image. Many architects and people protested, and new laws were introduced restricting the demolition of buildings of historical importance and taking construction under control. Other European countries learned from Belgium's mistakes. Populations across Europe still dislike modern structures. Many cities adopted zoning regulations, and building a fancy glass skyscraper in Europe isn't that easy. Still, cities with big financial centers like London, Frankfurt, or Istanbul require commercial space. So, in some cities, there are several skyscrapers somewhere outside the historic centers, forming separate skyscraper districts. Rome, the capital of Italy and one of the oldest cities in the world, rejected skyscrapers completely, stating that no high-rise will ever appear there. Also, have you noticed that most skyscrapers are made of glass? Turns out, the choice is not random at all, and there are several reasons to favor glass in their construction. The first one is that glass can be pressed in every shape possible, so the skyscraper can no longer be just a plain, boring vertical tower as before, but all of these fancy designs we have around the world now. The second reason is that glass is a very thin material. The walls are thinner and the floors are bigger, providing more inner space, unlike in the pre-home insurance building times. Glass is also transparent. Glass reduces the need for electrical lighting inside the building, so it's also very cost-effective. Even more, glass is temperature and therefore weather-resistant. And finally, it just looks posh, fancy, and modern. So, theoretically, skyscrapers maximize urban space, accommodate more people, and reduce energy use. In practice, everything is a bit less efficient. Skyscrapers have more space between them than lower buildings, so that already means more land used than we imagined. Also, around 40% of a skyscraper's floor space isn't accommodated because it's used for elevator shafts and emergency egress. Every additional floor adds less floor space than the previous one. As for the energy, skyscrapers still require a lot of heat and cooling, and we shouldn't forget about the energy elevators use. Okay, let's find out what are the countries with the biggest number of skyscrapers in the world. I'll give you the top 15 as of September 2022. So, number 15 is Panama, with 66 skyscrapers there. Number 14, with 67 skyscrapers, is Turkey. 13th place goes to Singapore. They have 95 skyscrapers. Then there goes India, with 112 of them. Quite a few of those were built in recent years, so that's a big jump they made. Next up, 122 skyscrapers in the Philippines. Thailand opens the top 10 with 125 skyscrapers. Canada surpasses it a bit, having 126. 8th place goes to Indonesia, which has 129. Australia is home to 141 of them and gets 7th place. Level up, now we're talking 266, and it's Malaysia. Japan beats it by just 5 and opens the top 5. Number 4 is, no surprise, another Asian country. It's South Korea, with 276 skyscrapers. The United Arab Emirates make it to the top 3 with 314 buildings. Now, we all know the two countries with the biggest number of skyscrapers if you've been attentive today. Yes, the second place goes to the founding father of skyscrapers, the United States of America. They have 859 of them. That's a big jump from third place, but there's an even bigger one. With 2,976 skyscrapers, the first place goes to China. 9 countries in the top 15 are Asian. 3 countries are from the Americas, 1 in the Middle East, 1 in Europe, and 1 in Australia. I bet you've heard of the infamous Bermuda Triangle. However, there is a lesser-known sibling that could be even more unsettling than its counterpart. The Bridgewater Triangle, located in Massachusetts, is a small but intense hotspot of paranormal activity. Cryptozoologist Lauren Coleman coined the term back in 1983 to describe this 200-square-mile area that encompasses eerie points in Abington, Rehoboth, and Freetown. Within its borders lie numerous towns, including Bridgewater, from which it draws its name. For those brave enough to explore, there is even a guidebook available detailing the creepiest sites within the region. You can start your trip with King Philip's Cave in Norton. Legend has it that Wampanoag leader Metacomet, aka King Philip, used to hang out there during his epic rebellion against the British in the 1600s. And now, some brave souls swear they've seen ghostly lights and heard phantom drums in the cave. But if ghost hunting isn't your thing, how about checking out the Hockomock Swamp in the Bridgewater Triangle? People claim to have spotted everything from Bigfoot to giant birds and snakes around the lake. And there are also rumors of phantom fires and ghostly lights to keep you on your toes. It's like a paranormal party out there. And if you prefer real-life creepy tales, you've got to swing by the Solitude Stone in Bridgewater. Tucked away by the Nunkatesset River, this stone carries a haunting story dating back to the 1800s. A local minister carved a mysterious poem on it, and over the years, it's become a hotspot for ghost hunters and history buffs alike. Located in Australia, the Monte Cristo homestead may appear as a charming Aussie home from the outside, but looks can be deceiving. Behind its closed doors lies a sinister story that has led to its reputation as the most haunted house in Australia. It was originally owned by Christopher Crawley, who made his fortune with the Railway Hotel in Junee. Dark events occurred within the walls of the Monte Cristo homestead. The Crawley family resided in the late Victorian-style mansion perched atop a hill overlooking the town. Tragedy struck with the demise of Christopher in 1910 and his wife Elizabeth in 1933. Upon the family's departure in 1948, the house fell into disrepair and was left abandoned. The Ryan family later purchased the homestead and worked to restore it, only to discover they were not alone. Strange occurrences such as unusual animal behavior and encounters with mysterious lights and ghostly figures prompted the Ryans to believe the house was haunted. Legend has it that at least 10 spirits roam the halls of Monte Cristo homestead. You can choose from a variety of ghosts at the haunted house: a young kid who was dropped by a nurse down the stairs, a maid who plummeted from a balcony, or a stable boy who tragically passed away in a fire. The most active spirit is the caretaker's son, who was discovered chained next to his deceased mother and remained chained for 4 decades. As of now, the house functions as a bed and breakfast, providing dinner and a ghost tour detailing its dark history. Braver guests have the option to stay overnight in the eerie residence. Located in the quaint town of St. Francisville near New Orleans, Myrtle's Plantation is a historic mansion with a 125-foot veranda and a grand foyer adorned with a magnificent French crystal chandelier. The mansion has a dark past, with 10 people having lost their lives within its walls. As a result, there have been numerous reports of ghost sightings, including the infamous Chloe, a spectral figure wearing a distinctive green turban that haunts visitors in their rooms. Other reported ghosts include a young girl peering through a window, a kid bouncing on beds, a soldier, a voodoo priestess, and the ghost of a previous owner. Despite its reputation as the most haunted house in America, Myrtle's Plantation, just like Monte Cristo Homestead, now operates as a charming bed and breakfast with 21 accommodations. Visitors can take ghost tours during the day or opt for more popular and spine-chilling evening tours. In addition, a restaurant on the property offers fresh, locally sourced cuisine to guests. Originally built in 1824, the Italian-style horseshoe-shaped opera house in San Juan, Puerto Rico has been a prominent fixture in the city's cultural landscape for over a century. Despite rumors of paranormal occurrences, Teatro Tapia is a must-see due to its distinctive architectural beauty. According to local legend, the theater is haunted by 2 ghostly figures. One is a woman in a red dress who appears in box 105 before disappearing, while the other is an actress who tragically fell on stage in the 1800s and is said to perform for invisible audiences before vanishing. They say her ghost wanders through the theater, occasionally singing on stage and causing doors to slam shut backstage. Although these ghostly tales cannot be confirmed, the theater's 200-year history leaves room for speculation. The Castle of Good Hope is the oldest building in South Africa, built between 1666 and 1679 by soldiers, sailors, and whatnot. The main purpose was to protect people living there. But apparently, it turns out to be a place that scares each and every person who visits it. You may say it's all just vivid imagination and there's nothing paranormal about this place, but here's the deal. Many people claim they heard voices and steps in the dungeon. Plus, the bell in the bell tower is said to ring sometimes, but it's not really possible for the bell to ring as the tower was bricked some centuries ago. There's a legend, though, that explains the eerie ringing. They say a soldier settled scores with life there, and it must be his ghost ringing. But wait, it gets even spookier. There's a ghostly black dog that likes to scare people, a tall glowing man who jumps off walls, and even a lady from the 18th century who still plays host to important guests. Today, the castle is a military museum and a spot for traditional ceremonies. The place is full of untold secrets waiting to be uncovered. Known as the Giant of Loire Valley, this French castle is seriously impressive. It has 7 floors, 204 rooms, loads of portrait galleries, and even its own opera house that fits 200 people. Originally built as a fortress back in the 11th century, it even got royal visits. But here's where things get really interesting. Apparently, the place is haunted by the Green Lady, aka La Dame Verte. She's said to be the love child of King Charles VII, and her story ended tragically in the 15th century when her husband did her in for cheating. People claim they've seen her ghostly figure in the chapel tower, decked out in her signature green dress with creepy, hollow eyes and a missing nose. Some even say they've heard her wailing throughout the castle. Now, this castle has been turned into a swanky hotel that throws cool events like markets. But if you're brave enough to spend a night there, the rooms there are lush. Step inside the ancient Ram Inn, a place where darkness lurks around every corner, and the spirits of the past never truly rest. Whispers echo through the halls, accompanied by the sound of distant footsteps and the unexplained feeling of icy fingers brushing against your skin. Shadows dance in the flickering candlelight, casting eerie shapes on the ancient walls, adorned with sinister symbols of a forgotten time. As you venture deeper into the inn, the temperature drops dramatically, sending a chill down your spine that no amount of layers can warm. The ghostly apparitions that roam the corridors are said to be lost souls seeking revenge, or simply unable to move on to the next realm. In the bishop's room, the most haunted of them all, the oppressive energy is suffocating, as if the very walls are closing in on you. But despite the overwhelming sense of fear and dread that permeates the inn, there are those who are drawn to its darkness like moths to a flame. They seek out the thrill of encountering the unknown and the rush of feeling the presence of the supernatural up close and personal.
Now, before somebody gets married in India, they get a thorough, shall we say, snooping, sometimes without even being aware of that. There are pre-matrimonial detective agencies in India that provide services of private investigators. There are also spit inspectors. These people, also known as nuisance detectors, catch and give fines to those who litter or spit in public. One more profession you aren't likely to meet anywhere else is an ear cleaner. So the process of removing earwax requires some traditional instruments. They don't use Q-tips we're so used to. Their instruments are called the steel needle, some cotton, and a pincer. Yikes! The ear cleaner rolls some cotton around the needle so it looks like a Q-tip, and the clients have their ears cleaned. Ear cleaners usually can be found somewhere in the city center, around monuments, or at a local market. This profession is rare and exotic in today's India, but it used to be quite common. In this country, your dream may come true and you'll get paid for sliding down a water slide. The profession's called water slide tester, and these people have to control if the slides are both safe and fun. Usually these people work in various hotels and spend most of their time in planes, traveling from one resort to another. There's a village where locals have no locks on doors. Not a single house there has one. Even public toilets have no locks or doors, only a curtain, thank you. It might seem somewhat reckless, but in fact, it's one of the safest places out there. The locals lean a wooden stick against the door just to keep the stray dogs out of their houses. The only police station opened there only in 2015, and still there are no complaints. Even the local bank has no lock. It's officially the only bank in the world that's never locked. When the locals are out of town, they don't ask the neighbors to look after their houses, and they're not afraid to leave valuables, money, and jewelry without hiding them. Vegetarian dishes are quite popular in India, Between 15 and 30% of the whole country's population are vegetarian. Some people tend to eat fish only and never eat any land animals. Many large food chains, famous for yummy meat dishes, even provide a whole new vegetarian menu for India. Cutlery isn't really required for many traditional Indian dishes. They say that mouth-watering curry tastes even better if eaten with the fingers. Now, I would assume that you'd want to eat the fingers separately, but hey, just thinking out loud here. There's also a wide range of crazy traditional dishes, but there's one called… okay, let's just put it on the screen, thanks. It's made from potatoes, which are pretty common for Indian food. The exotic part is that the potatoes in the dish are actually extra old. Even more, they're rotten. And there's a bunch of traditional spices. It's just a side dish, you'll need to choose the main course. Samosas are another traditional Indian dish made of potatoes. They're deep-fried and look like dumplings, and they're both a side dish and a main course. Now, if you love sugar, don't forget to thank India for it. It was first extracted and refined there about 2,500 years ago. Then the Chinese picked up the technique, and it spread all over the world. Another thing you should be grateful to India for is shampoo. The very first version was made from dried herbs, some extracts, and water. Soap berries and soap nuts were widespread in India, so this component was a perfect match for the shampoo formula. It's probably because of the right shampoos that most Indians have absolutely stunning hair and cool hairstyles. By the way, in India, it's possible to cut clients' hair with fire. It's not that widespread though. Only one barber is said to do it. First, they sprinkle the hair with some flammable powder, then they light it up and literally set the hair on fire. While the hair's burning, the stylist creates the right shape with the help of 2 combs. He says the fire helps fix the hair right. He also claims to have at least 15 clients each day who come to get this very cut. He sure makes it look like it's a cinch to do. If you like holidays, India is the destination for you. Indians have about 1,000 various festivals and events. Sometimes people even celebrate the first hair cutting, or who knows, hair burning. All of the local celebrations are totally worth seeing. Holi is the festival of colors, and people consider it to mark the beginning of spring. It starts at the end of February and finishes in March. It involves the famous powder throwing, so don't wear that brand new white shirt to the festival. Diwali is the celebration of lights that lasts 5 days. People give gifts to each other, usually sweets, and light thousands of candles and oil lamps. No other country in the world has that many celebrations. India holds a lot of world records too. The largest sundial in the world is located in the town of Jaipur. It's a tower 90 feet tall. It's made of polished stone and looks like an architectural masterpiece. The shadow of this sundial moves at about 2.5 inches per minute, so you can see the time literally move there. Another longest thing in India are nails. According to the Guinness World Records, the longest fingernails ever belong to an Indian man. They're almost as long as a London double-decker bus. He cut them off back in 2018, but before, the total length of all his fingernails had reached 358 inches. There's also a record for the quantity of movies produced per year. In 2018, 1,813 new movies were filmed in India. The quantity is so impressive that if you wanted to watch all the movies made in the country in 2018 and you watched a movie per day, you'd still be watching them today in 2021. North Sentinel Island, which is a part of India, is probably the world's most remote place since nobody can visit it. Strangers aren't welcome there. The locals are quite introverted and would always reject any contact from outside. No ship is allowed to come closer than 5 nautical miles, and special people always patrol the area. It's one of the very few places in the world that has no modern civilization. Recently, the island's been open to the researchers, but tourists still can't visit it. Several years ago, 2 frogs got married in one coastal town named Udupi. It was done to encourage the rainfall. It was too hot, over 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Both animals had unique outfits for this occasion, and the bride even had a toe ring. The 2 frogs were sent off on a honeymoon to Manipala and were released there. Sadly, Each of these guys had to go their own way a couple of months later because the locals had to stop the downpour that started soon after their wedding somehow. There are not 4 but 6 seasons overall here. According to the North, West, and Central Indian calendars, Indian Spring is in March and April. Next comes summer, also known as hot season. It starts in May and finishes in June. It's also one of the marriage seasons. Next comes monsoon, also known as rainy season. It starts after the summer solstice, usually in July, and lasts throughout August. Next comes fall, which spreads from late September to mid-November. After fall, they have a pre-winter or simply cool season. The real winter or cold season starts in January and goes on until February. In fact, there are many more other calendars in India, but all of them have 6 seasons with slight differences. The Statue of Unity is actually twice as tall as the Statue of Liberty, reaching 600 feet. It was opened to the public only about 2 years ago, back in 2018. The statue consists of 5 parts, but only 3 of them are accessible to visitors. The first part starts at the statue base and finishes at the shins. This zone has 3 levels and includes the exhibition area, a garden, and a museum. The second part reaches up the statue's thighs. The third one has a viewing spot at a height of 500 feet. The fourth part is the maintenance area, and visitors can't get there. Finally, the fifth one comprises the shoulders and head. In the first 11 days after its opening, almost 130,000 tourists came to see this colossal statue. That's more than the population of the capital of Kansas, Topeka. Apparently, a whole lot of people showed up Topeka at this statue. Yeah, pun intended.
There are bridges in the Indian state of Meghalaya that are created entirely of living tree roots. The bridges are made up of tangled thick roots that makes them strong enough to hold over 50 people at a time. The Khasi and Jantia tribes became masters in the art of growing these insane bridges. They need them to cross the streams below with ease. Some of these bridges are over 180 years old. To make them, the members of the tribe care for the roots until they grow long enough to reach the opposite bank. It can take as long as 10 to 15 years to grow a bridge. In the process, the roots become tightly entwined with one another. This is how the bridges get so strong. Some of them are over 100 feet long. And once a bridge is fully grown, it can last over 500 years. While some roots decay, new ones are continually growing. That's why the unusual natural constructions last so long. Visitors to America's Death Valley National Park were stumped and a little bit scared when they found these highly unusual rocks. They appeared to be moving across the sand, all by themselves. There are many rocks that leave telltale signs in their wake. Scientists are baffled. Some of these rocks weigh over 650 pounds. And some of them have already traveled as much as almost 1,000 feet. There are many theories explaining this phenomenon. But the most probable one claims that the stones move because of something called an ice shove. In the winter, parts of the valley fill with water and the rocks at the bottom become frozen. And since ice can rise to the top of liquids, just like in your favorite soda, the rocks slightly lift from the floor, and then they scrape the muddy bottom of the lake bed. When the summer comes, the water evaporates and the ice melts. All that's left is the rocks and their mysterious trails. Volcanoes can not only shoot out burning hot lava, they can also fire lightning. When volcanoes erupt quickly, ash, dust, rock, lava, and gases are all released at breakneck speeds. This creates so much friction that it causes static electricity to build up and then shoot out in the form of lightning. Fire tornadoes are also a thing. They form when powerful winds hit an already existing fire and drag it upward into a terrifying column. The US watches at least one of these insane spectacles once a year or so. Some of them can reach heights of over 1,000 feet. One of the coolest and rarest natural phenomenon ever is a moonbow. And yes, it's exactly what you think, a rainbow around the moon. But for this lunar rainbow to appear, the conditions must be super precise. The moon must be low in the sky. The sky must be dark. Water droplets must be in the air in the opposite direction of the moon. It'll also help if the moon will be shining bright as a diamond. Moonbows occur when moonlight gets reflected off of water droplets in the air. The light hits the droplet at an angle that alters its direction. There are beaches with glowing water that look as if they had come straight out of your favorite sci-fi show. These incredible places can be found all over the world, from the Maldives to Puerto Rico. The mysterious glow is caused by tiny marine algae that live under the water's surface. They give off a bright light whenever waves and currents move them. And beaches start glowing blue, green, or red every time the tiny algae get agitated. Take a flight over the emerald woodlands of Western Australia, and you'll be surprised to find a series of bubblegum pink lakes. If you manage to venture down to the lakes, you're in for a treat. Their waters are completely safe to swim in. Not only will it make for the perfect Instapic, but this water also has incredibly high salinity. This basically means you'll be able to float on its surface. The lakes are surrounded by the deep blue Southern Ocean. Some lakes have their trademark color because they're filled with algae that have high levels of a red-orange pigment. Others are likely to contain tiny microorganisms called haloarchaea. They look red or pink when there's a bunch of them together, and there are people who believe that the lakes have this hue because they're full of bright pink prawns. Light pillars are colorful beams of light that either jet up from Earth towards the sky or shine down from the clouds. Usually, they only occur in cold temperatures as they form when the sunlight gets reflected off of ice crystals floating in the air. The higher the crystals are in the air, the taller these bright and colorful pillars become. They're most common at sunrise and sunset. There are hidden caves all over the world that are filled with glowing light. This light comes from hundreds of glowworms that have made a cozy home in the caves. Some of the caves are more than 30 million years old, and most of them can be found in New Zealand and Australia. The worms themselves don't actually glow, but baby worms called larvae form silk strings made out of mucus. These strings form nets. It's these nets that can illuminate the entire cave. Their purpose is to attract flies and other tasty insects for the glowworms to munch on. Rainbow trees are 100% a real thing. Hailing from the Philippines and Indonesia, these colorful wonders are called rainbow eucalyptus or rainbow gum. The rainbow hues are created by the contrast in colors of old and new bark. As the thin surface layers of bark peel away, they reveal newer ones with brighter, more eye-catching colors. The brand new bark is green, then it changes to purple, then red, and finally brown. This is because the trees contain a substance called chlorophyll. It makes the bark green. As each strip of bark ages, it loses chlorophyll and slowly changes its color. In a desert, you can find beautiful and unique roses made entirely of crystals. They form when sand particles get trapped and compacted during the rain. The quick switch between wet and dry conditions forms the crystals. The crystals, in turn, form a circular series of flat plates. This makes them look like intricate rose petals. And the whole process of their production is 100% natural. Next time you're taking a dip in the ocean, watch out for water spouts. These are basically water tornadoes. In the US, this crazy weather phenomenon is most common in the Florida Keys and the Gulf of Mexico. They often form during storms but can develop on completely calm waters too. Water spouts appear when two wind gusts blowing from different directions hit each other. The collisions make the air move upward, and it drags the water along with it too. Take a look at this. Looks like a forest, right? After all, there are many individual trees here. Well, it's actually just one giant tree. This is the Pando Aspen Grove in Utah. Underneath all that soil, there's a hidden network of roots connecting all these trees together, all 47,000 of them. Technically, this makes the aspens just one massive tree. No one knows how old the Pando Grove is. Some people say it's at least 80,000 years old. Others argue that it's closer to the age of 1 million years. Hidden in upstate New York, there's a mysterious fire that never goes out. What's even weirder is that the fire is concealed behind a waterfall. The flame is around 8 inches tall and it stays lit thanks to a natural gas seep behind the waterfall. The rocks around the waterfall shelter the flame, meaning it barely ever goes out. Think of animals that climb trees. We've got monkeys, cute little sloths, koalas, and most importantly, goats. Wait, what? Goats in Morocco have taught themselves to climb trees so that they can reach their favorite snack, tasty argan fruit. And farmers love this too. Once eaten by the goats, argan nuts pass through their digestive tract and farmers collect them. These nuts are really useful. When they're roasted, ground, mashed, or cold pressed, they turn into argan oil. It works wonders for hair and can be extremely expensive. No surprise farmers are so happy.
Hey there, quick question. What is the capital of Japan? If you said Tokyo, then you got it right. Tokyo is one of the most modern and colorful cities in Japan. But for over 1,000 years, Kyoto occupied that place. Yeah, I know, the names are similar. But while Tokyo is the futuristic center of Japan, Kyoto is one of the most traditional and historical cities in Japan. It's known as Japan's cultural capital. Let's play a game of Spot the Difference. Here are 2 photos. The first one is from Tokyo, and the second one is from Kyoto. Can you tell what is the main difference between both? Hold that thought for one more second. Here are 2 more pictures. The first one is from Asakusa, a neighborhood in Tokyo, while the second one is from Kyoto. What would you say is the main difference here? Well, you can probably guess where I'm headed. If you didn't figure it out, I'll spell it out for you. The main difference is in the colors. If you've ever had a chance to travel around a bit, you probably noticed how cities have certain color themes. Like Rome is terracotta, and Paris varies in tones of gray and sepia. Looking at these images, one can see that Tokyo is bright, electric, and looks even a bit chaotic. And Kyoto is monochromatic and gives the impression of being calmer and more peaceful. It's fascinating to see that what causes this distinction between both cities has to do with a certain landscape law. You see, in 2007, Kyoto passed a new law prohibiting colorful street signs. The law also wanted to standardize overall constructions to make the city look more homogeneous. Since Kyoto was Japan's capital city for such an extended period of time, it was built using traditional feng shui architecture and principles. That's why so many of the buildings have that traditional Asian shape to them, the one with the curvy ceiling, like you see in the Mulan movie. Sure, this style is very far from what modern architects are doing today. If you take a look at Tokyo, you'd see glass skyscrapers rather than these old buildings. But that's all part of a bigger plan, set in motion by something called the Miyako Landscape Guidelines. The municipality's main argument to pass the law was that Kyoto was losing its unique landscape due to Japan's modernization. If Kyoto were to follow in Japan's footsteps and build humongous skyscrapers, citizens would lose their view of the 3 mountains that surround the city. And let's face it, nobody would want that to happen. Plus, it's nice that you can go to different cities in Japan and notice that they are unique in their own way. If the landscape law was to be effective in all of Japan, we wouldn't get to see architectural marvels such as the Tokyo Sky Tree and the Asahi Flame Building. Now take a look at the Akihabara district in Tokyo. It is known as one of Japan's most modern neighborhoods. It's filled with top-notch technology at every corner. And yes, it's also filled with signs everywhere. If we compare it with Kyoto after the passing of the new law, the first thing that would have to go are the rooftop signs. Oh, and flashing and moving lights are also illegal there now. This Kyoto Starbucks also illustrates what I'm talking about. If you were strolling along the bucolic streets of Kyoto's countryside, searching for a place to get a cappuccino, you'd miss this coffee shop completely. I think we can agree that the traditional Starbucks logo was made to call attention, with that crowned siren-like creature supported by a very green background. In other places in Japan, it still looks like this. But in Kyoto, the brand went above and beyond to respect the new guidelines and produced this beautiful wooden logo. and a little plaque that says this building has lattes. Yes, indeed. There are multiple examples like this. In Kyoto, the 7-Eleven doesn't have its traditional red, orange, and green stripes. Its logo was changed to black and white. You can think that's dull, but I think we can agree to disagree. It looks perfect when you look at its surroundings. Oh, and what about McDonald's, the world's most famous burger franchise? It kept its yellow logo, but took the red out of the background. In terms of the color palette allowed, the law uses the Munsell color system to determine which chroma levels are acceptable. Usually, the faded version of strong colors like red, black, green, and so on are accepted. Now, imagine if they adopted a Wes Anderson palette. It would look like a Toy City, that's for sure. At first, vendors and shopkeepers felt disturbed by the new law. They didn't understand why they had to change their branding for the sake of some aesthetic the city was trying to preserve. But with time, they not only came to terms with the new law, but could already see the benefits of it for their brand success. You see, this helped turn Kyoto into an even bigger tourist attraction. Tourists felt like they were traveling in time, sort of. Some tourists even like to dress up in traditional kimonos and walk around like geishas. The municipality also began an award system to compensate the shops and brands that had done their homework well. Of course, the camouflage Starbucks won an award back in 2018, as did Sagawa, a major delivery company in Japan, back in 2012. It's not only shops that needed to adjust to the new guidelines. Things such as vending machines and post offices also needed to be toned down. Again, the idea is to make the city more visually coherent, and they sure help. Now, what happens if you don't follow the rules? Well, the people who chose to ignore the landscape law can spend up to 1 year in jail or pay a huge fine. We can also compare the differences inside Kyoto itself. Around the city center, the landscape law is less strict, so you'll find taller buildings and even bigger and more colorful signs. But as you leave the center and move towards smaller cities in the countryside, the law is much more strict. It's especially strict around the UNESCO heritage sites. In case you're not aware, there are 17 heritage sites in Kyoto. Yep, that's a lot. But that's what makes Kyoto so unique. Now, welcome to the neighborhood of Pontulcho. This neighborhood is a good example of how the landscape law changed the city's mood over the years. Pontulcho is a cute alleyway in Kyoto that spans over several blocks. If you look at this Google Street image from 2009 and this one from 2023, you'll see clear differences. For starters, the huge sign at the entrance of the alleyway is gone, and so are the wires hanging from the tops of the shops. The pavement was redone and the big store signs disappeared. It's much cleaner. At night, the alleyway turned into the perfect spot for atmospheric dining, since its legislation decided to rule over the type of lighting allowed in the neighborhood. This is what it looks like at nighttime. Hey, you fancy grabbing some sushi? I can't help thinking that this landscape law contributed a lot to Japan's minimalist architecture. Although images like these ones in Tokyo are far from the idea we have of this minimalist aesthetic, Kyoto falls right into place with it. How about we take a quick look inside one of these establishments? The Starbucks we mentioned earlier also invested in turning its interior design local. It's the first ever Starbucks where you can drink tea on a tatami floor. You can sit cross-legged, like many Japanese people do, and enjoy a delicious hot beverage. I must say I quite like the new Kyoto. How about you?